morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to this session. Who in here has been a mentor to a new hunter? By show of hands. Awesome. What I want to talk about this morning is how do we take what we're doing today and do maybe more of it and a little bit differently. If we want to have a vibrant hunting culture in the future, we need to really do things today that are going to be a little bit different, and that is embracing and educating non-hunters. And not just kids, but adults. And I want to start by actually shifting our vernacular a little bit, the words we use, because I think even this word of non-hunters is an issue. Because implied within that is, hey, you grew up hunting or you didn't. You're in one camp or the other. So I would switch non-hunters to the NotYet hunters. And what that little change in phrasing does is opens up any and every single person, whether they're 5, 15, or 75, if they haven't hunted before, they can start. Let's look at it in a little bit more detail. Fact, I think we all know this. Participation in hunting has been on the decline for the last 30 years. It's a long period of time. And we've been doing a lot of good work, but we need to do more. Why do we need to do more? The data. This is a chart I've used a lot over the last few years from U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Well, the other day I looked at 2016 study. The preliminary results came out in this last fall, which said in 2016, 11.5 million hunting licenses sold. That was a number that was predicted to be the 2025 participation figure. This is 2016, 9 years earlier. So low, it fell off the chart, which had a bottom line of 13.5 million. So we still have 11.5 million of us out there, and probably more who have just lapsed. It was mentioned just in the last session, this issue which just dropped literally yesterday, the cover, How to Make a Hunter. Now here's the interesting part, or the part it's pretty rough, why we're lousy at recruiting new hunters. So again, it's pretty negative. I don't like that. And the one thing that gets talked about a lot, if you look at those declines, in the short term, that's pretty good. It means more land for us, more animals for us to hunt, right? Which is pretty nice. But in the long run, if we don't stem this tide, we're going to lose money, more money. You look at the license sales, the PR dollars, et cetera, and we're going to lose political influence in DC. And that will be bad in the long run, and I think could have very detrimental consequences for the culture of hunting. So how did we get here? That's the real question, right? And it's a complex question because it's not any one thing. There are a host of issues that are out there, but there are three that I think are big ones culturally. Urbanization, overscheduling, and distractions. Urbanization, anybody recognize that picture? Uptown, there we go. That is uptown Minneapolis. That's where all the young kids want to go and live. That's where everybody's going to go. There's the cool bars, you got the new pubs, you got all the places you can go out to, okay? So in 1980, 73% of the US population lived in urban areas. In a short few decades later, the data from 2017, 82% of America lives in urban areas. 9% increase in just a few decades, and it's not slowing down. What does that mean? That means we have people living and growing up in places where they're not connected to wild places. They probably don't own a gun. They're not part of the culture and what many of us, probably 100% of us in here, grew up with. Going and messing around out in the woods when you're a kid and figuring out what it means to be outside. Learning about wildlife, and then hunting for the first time when you're a young kid. So this is a challenge we need to acknowledge, and we need to figure out how do we address that? How do we engage somebody differently if they've grown up and they're living in that type of a lifestyle? Overscheduling. 65% of college graduates say they feel taxed and overburdened on a weekly basis. And I think especially when it's two working parents, you got kids in the mix, and when you factor that in with kids' schedules of academics, all the sports choices, weekend traveling teams, etc. We know this. This is a challenge. And then finally, distractions. Distractions in the form of technology. On average, a millennial spends 9 hours a day consuming media of some sort digitally. 9 hours a day. And they're going to click or check this thing over 150 times. So relative to this, what I do with my work is rather than having it be the enemy, is figure out how we leverage it. How do we go to people here? How do we convince them that this is not a problem? And how do we leverage technology to engage new hunters? So there's a bigger cultural thing going on too, again, with that urbanization switch. So if we take today's millennial on the right, son or daughter, let's go back 4 generations to their great-grandfather. Great-grandfather was probably a farmer and usually hunted. Now, it may have just been the gun over the mantle. You need a deer, you go out and you shoot one, or if there's an animal causing a ruckus on the farm, you go and take care of it. That's just part of the lifestyle. Well, his son, grandfather, maybe grew up or was living in a small town. But again, still hunted. Take it to that next generation, now the father of the millennial. They tried hunting as a kid because their father did that. Then they went off to college, and they moved to uptown after, or they moved to wherever. They moved to Chicago, they moved to New York. Maybe they ended up back here, but they lost that connection over the long term. They tried it when they were young, but it wasn't for them for whatever reason. It didn't become ingrained in their daily lifestyle. So now we've got the millennial whose father had that experience. There is no connection. We truly have a divide there. Now, the good thing with that is that because they don't have that connection to hunting, it's all the more enticing and interesting because it's novel, it's out there. And so that's what we're finding. I'm going to show you today some examples of how we're bringing those people in. They don't have the connection, and because of that, we leverage that as a way to create some excitement out of it because it's different. They haven't been part of that culture. So where do we look for the not yet hunters? Again, where we're looking today a lot of times would be with youth. So we're taking the kids out, which is excellent. Love that. Let's get them more out. But I would argue that young adults, we're going to get more return on that, and in some respects can be easier. First of all, no guardian required. So you got 50% less energy in terms of the number of people. 1 person versus 2 that you have to convince to be part of it. Then they have what I call the 3 M's. They've got the money, the mobility, and the motivation. They're the person, not the parent saying, you know what, you should go do this. They're the one who said, you know what, I want to try this out. And you know what, I've got a car, and I've got some money. If I need to get some boots, or maybe I need to get a gun, I can do that. And so that's why I would argue focusing on young adults, the millennials, whatever we want to call it, the 18 plus is a very effective group for us to look at and growing our numbers. Now here's where we start to get a little bit different maybe than the way we've thought in the past. And this is looking at deeper things like value sets and groups or organizations or people, individuals who have maybe similar values but not exactly the same as what we have in our background. So let's look at areas where there is either stability in terms of numbers or potentially even growth rather than our situation of decline. Climbing, skiing, biking, kayaking, canoeing. These are the activities that are outside that are part of the 48% of America, the 140 plus million Americans who go outside all the time, but they're probably not hunting. So how do we take their passion to explore and seek adventure outside and say, hey, you know what, here's another way to consider doing it. Take fishing as an example. You're observing the river. Why not participate, become part of that ecosystem, read the water? You're out walking through the woods, you're hiking, you're biking. Why not look for the animal sign? understand what's going on, and maybe become part of that process. Bring a gun along. Take a fishing rod. So again, similar values. Similarly, other groups, those that have an appreciation for the wilderness, maybe not so adventurous, but they're already there. They're hiking, they're birding, they're camping. Again, go from the observation position to participant position in terms of the depth of the wildlife. Make it more interesting. Challenge yourself to, again, read the signs, see what's going on, and become part of it. And you'll find that they'll embrace it in really interesting ways. The last one is, in the past, I think that we've had a lot of tendency to talk about you're either a hunter or you're the anti-hunter. When in reality, if you look at the trend right now, there is a group of people out there that will find the killing of animals acceptable as long as we respect it and you utilize the animal to its fullest extent. And these are the people where we have the opportunity to convince them to try hunting. So what this is here is a chart that shows you new company and new product introduction in the category called clean food. Why? Because the market demand is there for food that is more transparent, where this person knows, is it grass-fed beef, is it free-range chicken, is it heritage pork, etc. These are the people that are concerned about where's their food coming from and want to know if they can go be part of a CSA and or go to a local rancher and buy it. And they're also the ones that when you say, have you thought about hunting? They say, no, I haven't, but I'm open to that conversation. So how do we engage the not yet hunters? Step one, identify the likely recruits. Just going out and talking. And ask somebody, you know what? Do you like preserving the wilderness? You like going out to state parks, etc.? Did you know that hunters are one of the biggest conservation contributors in the country throughout history, going back to the 1930s, going back to TR, etc.? Raise that awareness so people understand, oh, RMEF did a great job last year, the year before, with their Hunting is Conservation campaign, I thought. Just connecting those two. Again, raising the awareness that hunting is conservation, which is sometimes a tough thing for people to get their head around. And we've all experienced that, right? You know, what do you mean you love those animals? You kill them. It's a tough thing for people to get their heads around. But if you have a conversation, you can do that. You know, if they're a big foodie person, they love going to the restaurants because they're serving heritage pork and grass-fed beef, talk to them about venison, talk to them about what a pheasant tastes like. Introduce them to those ideas that are part of the hunting culture. If they like adventure, if they're a kayaker, if they're a mountain biker, tell them a story about your favorite hunt that you had, about an adventure you had, where, again, you were a participant out in nature, and they can relate to that, and then hopefully ask the question of, how could I do that? So I think it's going to take all of us together, working together, looking for opportunities to have one-on-one conversations, using the tools through digital media, social media, etc., to push messaging out there in the right way that's positive. And if you think about it, I think you'll find different opportunities and different people that you might have in the past thought, you know what, they're a non-hunter. And hopefully you can reposition them as a not yet hunter and maybe turn them into a hunter at some point. Here's something we also need to do a better job of. Listen to their story. You know the old adage of we got two of these, one of these. Listen to why they might have interest. If you think they've got a little tidbit of interest in there, ask them why. Understand where their motivations may be coming from, and then have a conversation about how they might fit in. But if we start with listening, they'll appreciate that a lot more. And again, connect their interests to hunting, like I just said. If they're wilderness, if they're a foodie person, if they're more of an adventurous individual. Listen to their story and then connect it into how hunting can support that value, that thing that they value. Explore those opportunities. Again, it could be weapon specific, it could be species specific, it could be location specific in terms of what they want. Maybe somebody says, you know, I've always wanted to trout fish. Maybe they say, you know, I've always wanted to pheasant hunt because I don't like getting up early and I like walking through fields on warm days versus sitting in a deer stand. Listen to what their potential interests are and then tailor the conversation to those interests. And then last, you know, engage them, and this is the hard part. Engage them and stick with them. If somebody is interested in it and you get them out, follow up with them a few months later. Hey, how's it going? Did you get out again? You didn't? Well, you know what? I know somebody who lives by you. Maybe you can head out with them. They're going hunting next week. Those are the types of things that are critical to us having a stickiness that's going to work with these people. There is a significant portion of the population that doesn't understand that wildlife is managed and that there are regulations like bag limits, etc. They don't get that. Their concept is you just get a gun and you go out and you kill stuff. And so like that's something we all take for granted and we don't even think about, but is a great example of the type of issue you may need to educate somebody on right from the get-go of you know, not only is this very carefully managed, but it is paid for by hunters, and it is carefully adhered to in terms of how we ensure the future vibrant herd of a deer, populations of the pheasants, and all the work that you people are doing. Those are the stories we need to get out there. When I heard that, I never would have thought that that was not understood by everyone because we're so deep into this culture. One of the things I want to share with you, a short film we've been in production on the last 6 months. Last spring, we identified 3 individuals, adults, who had 0 hunting background and said, do you want to learn how to hunt? And they said, yeah. And we said, okay, we want to follow you through this entire process and chronicle it on film so that we can share your story so that somebody else can say, I can relate to that person. They look differently than I thought hunters did. He or she said they want to learn to hunt. Maybe I can do it too.
So my first introduction into this came as a desire to want to get closer into nature. So I'm born and raised in urban areas, and I've lived in urban areas my entire life. And so my first times being able to get into nature and just experience that have always been really transformative for me. And so my desire to hunt has really come from that love of nature and being able to go from being more of an observer to more of a participant, but doing so in a way that really respects the integrity of the animal and all that stuff. So,
yeah, so this really didn't start happening until I moved up here. So it's only my Minnesota relatives that are really into hunting. Everywhere else, my grandfather owned some guns, my uncle owned some guns, but they really didn't hunt per se. And growing up, we didn't have any guns in the house.
Yeah, we didn't have any guns in the house either. It was very much a non-hunting family, even extended family. Nobody hunted, and just the idea of guns, I was never against anyone having guns. I just didn't want to have guns in the house based on hearing all those stories on the news of someone accidentally shooting, someone gets killed or hurt, and just those ideas that it just seemed, oh gosh, it's just irresponsible to have a gun in the house. So yeah, far away from hunting as one could be.
And this is what I've heard around, you read online accounts of hunters doing their first hunt, their first kill, and it's a very visceral experience. It's something that you take with you from that moment on. Yeah. It's gonna be intense.
It's just that I suppose the part where I get stuck at is the idea of literally pulling the trigger, and knowing that I'm snuffing out the life of an animal, and also trying to frame it in where we live in this day and age where it's more of a hobby that you can choose to hunt rather than hunting for survival, but wanting to hunt with a survival mindset so that everything gets used. It's not about a prize or getting the biggest animal, but being able to kill an animal and use every part of that, and by using every part that I possibly can, I'm honoring.
Well, yeah, I think it really comes down to you need to respect what you're doing. Like you're not doing this, you shouldn't be doing this just for sport. Just killing for the sake of killing is immoral.
Right.
And I love that you are committed to using every part of the animal. Nothing goes to waste. I mean, that is truly being respectful of the harvesting of the animal. I'm Alex. I want to start hunting because I want to learn more about the culture surrounding it and be truly aware of where my food's coming from.
My name is Becca, and I want to start hunting because I've been a forager of vegetation, and I now want to have the full circle experience by learning how to live off the land completely, including animals.
My name is Pierce, and I want to hunt so I can go from being an observer to a participant in the natural ecosystem.
The full film will be released, their full journey this spring.
We're short on time, so I think we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. Thank you very much.